Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking an exploration into what I think is really the heart of high-stakes leadership. We're talking about boldness.
We are. And our mission today is to give you a really comprehensive, a really detailed roadmap. We're going to dissect the psychology, the strategies, the actual steps you can take.
Right, to go from just managing things to actually being an engine of real impact, measurable impact.
And this is, I have to say, a very timely and critical deep dive. The whole starting point has just fundamentally changed.
How so?
Well, the sources we're looking at are all definitive on this point. Playing it safe is no longer safe. That's the big reversal.
So the old wisdom is now the biggest risk.
Exactly. I mean, think about the world we're in. It's all accelerating complexity, right? Technological disruption, market shifts. In that environment, hesitation isn't a virtue. It's exponentially expensive.
I think you really underestimate the true cost of that delay. We frame it in our minds as, I'm just waiting for more information, but that time, that lag.
It costs you so much. It costs you momentum, which is incredibly hard to get back once it's gone. It costs you clarity.
And maybe the biggest one, it erodes trust. Your teams are just sitting there waiting for you to make a call.
Precisely. We have all been conditioned by this outdated leadership myth. It says you have to wait until you are 100% certain.
Or that you need total consensus from everyone in the room.
Right. And what our source material argues very compellingly is that this approach, it isn't really leadership. It's just risk management applied poorly. It's a path to becoming irrelevant.
So that brings us right to the core definition then. If we're talking about making these choices under pressure, what are we actually defining as boldness? Because it's not just, being the loudest person in the room.
Oh, far from it. That's a really shallow interpretation. The core definition, the real one, is acting with clarity, courage, and conviction. And here's the kicker, especially when fear or high uncertainty is present.
Okay, so the fear is part of the recipe, not something to be avoided.
It's a required ingredient. And what's key here is the difference between, say, reactive, high-drama leadership and what the sources are calling operational boldness.
Operational boldness. Let's break that down.
It's responsive. It's intentional. It chooses long-term alignment and value creation over, a short-term gain or just getting everyone to agree for a minute. It's the steady commitment to the mission, even when the path is scary.
Okay, let's unpack that distinction a bit more, the one between courage and pure fearlessness. Because I think most people hear bold and they picture some kind of emotional superhero who just doesn't feel apprehension.
And that is probably the single most important myth we have to dismantle in this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
Bold leadership is explicitly not about being fearless.
In fact, it's kind of the opposite.
It is. The sources really emphasize this idea of fear presence. It's about being fully present with the fear.
Yes.
You feel it, you recognize it, you name it, and you still choose to act in alignment with your values and the mission.
To the leaders who are truly bold, they're just very clear on their values.
They're clear on their values, committed to their purpose, and brave enough to deliver what actually counts, not just what's easy or what everyone's expecting.
That reframing, just that one shift, it immediately changes boldness from some fixed personality trait you either have or you don't, to a learned skill, a process, even a neurological one.
It is a process. And if that bold move happens before you have all the certainty, then we need a massive shift in how we measure success. We can't keep relying on the old, traditional lagging indicators.
Right, because if we wait for the quarterly revenue report or the annual headcount survey to tell us if we were bold,
it's already way too late. The game is over.
Right.
That's why the sources are calling for a measurement revolution. They're introducing this concept of bold metrics.
Okay, so traditional metrics, revenue, customer sat, whatever. They tell you what already happened. They're historical.
They're looking in the rearview mirror. Bold metrics, on the other hand, they track the moments of leadership choice, the moments of movement. They're the leading indicators that actually build your future capacity and resilience.
Can you give us a concrete example? Because moments of choice can sound a little abstract. What does a bold metric actually track?
Okay, let's make it tangible. A traditional lagging indicator might be, say, employee retention. A bold metric, which is focused on creating future capacity, might track something like the percentage of team meetings where a junior or mid-level team member successfully challenged a senior leader's established assumption.
Wow, okay. Or maybe something like,
Or the frequency of conversations initiated by the leader that's specifically focused on the organization's greatest internal weakness.
So you're not tracking the financial results of the risk. You're tracking the courage itself. You're tracking the communication, the proactive, the willingness to go there.
Exactly. These metrics, they act as your leadership compass. They track your real-time movement away from the status quo. And the ultimate question these bold metrics are designed to answer, the one that tracks long-term value, is this. What became possible because I made that bold move? That would not have happened if I had played it safe.
That just cuts straight to the real ROI of being bold, which, as you said, might show up as a culture that innovates faster, or a team that trusts its own judgment.
Or a brand that just commands authority because it's not afraid.
Yeah.
It fundamentally moves the entire focus.
Right. Instead of defending the comfort of what you already have, you're proactively measuring the risk, the cost of doing nothing.
And that proactive measurement, that sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. We're going to systematically explore how to activate this system. We'll start with the two major internal traps.
Fear and comfort.
Fear and comfort. And then we'll detail the frameworks for turning those insights into decisive, measurable, and importantly, repeatable action.
All right, let's dive into part one then. The two great traps. Let's start with the one everyone recognizes. Fear. We've already established that bold leadership is about being fear present. But for most people, fear just feels like a weakness, a psychological flaw. How do we actually shift our relationship with it and turn it into fuel?
We have to get past this idea that fear is a flaw. The source material refers to fear as one of your most powerful signals. It's your intelligence system.
Your intelligence system.
Yeah. It's telling you one simple thing. This matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's a signal that this moment, this decision, it holds weight. There's risk, there's reward, there's real consequence or change on the table. If you feel fear before a decision, it's just verification that the decision is a meaningful one.
That sounds great in theory, but, when the fear actually hits, it doesn't feel like intelligence. It feels overwhelming. It feels like a physical block. What's the biology behind that feeling?
Understanding the biology is critical for any leader. When we face that kind of high-stakes uncertainty, the amygdala, that's the brain's deep, ancient alarm system, it just activates instantly. It's designed for one thing, survival, which leads to the classic fight, flight, or freeze response.
So it's a feature, not a bug. The alarm is supposed to go off.
It's absolutely a feature. Those fear signals are integral to complex decision-making because they alert you to choices that have real lasting consequences. Honestly, if you didn't feel fear, you'd probably just be reckless.
So the amygdala is firing. How does the bold leader stop that freeze response and get back in the driver's seat?
And this is where the neuroscience gives us a really elegant, really actionable tool. Research shows that the simple, intentional act of naming the raw fear, just speaking it aloud, writing it down, even just labeling it in your head.
That simple act
activates the prefrontal cortex. That's your rational, strategic CEO part of the brain.
So articulating the fear is like building a bridge from the reactive part of your brain to the strategic part. But if it's that easy, just naming it, why aren't all executives doing this all the time? What's the catch? That's a great question. The difficulty is, I think, twofold. First, our own ego often gets in the way. It prevents leaders from admitting the raw, honest fear, so we gloss over it. And second, the amygdala's reaction speed is it's lightning fast, way faster than our conscious naming process. You have to be intentional about it. It takes practice.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say you feel your heart rate just spike before a critical investor pitch. You don't ignore that feeling. You don't suppress it. You pause for just a second and you say internally, I am feeling anxiety about this pitch because it protects the mission and our team's future.
So you're relabeling it. You're giving it a purpose.
You're giving it a purpose. And that cognitive relabeling, the studies show, it can reduce the amygdala's reactivity, the raw intensity of the fear, by up to 50%.
Yeah.
You move from being led by fear to leading with awareness of the fear.
That's incredibly powerful. It changes the whole dynamic from managing anxiety to leveraging your own biology. So if fear is now our fuel, we need a mechanism to actually ignite it. Let's walk through the 3 steps of this practical tool you mentioned, the fuel formula.
The fuel formula is designed for a very specific thing, to translate that anticipatory fear, the fear we feel before we act, into momentum. And that's often the most paralyzing kind.
Right, the fear of the thing is often worse than the thing itself.
Always. And the science on this is crystal clear. Action shrinks fear. Inaction feeds it. So this formula is about creating commitment first, because clarity follows commitment, not the other way around.
Okay, so step 1 is face it. And this seems to require some radical honesty. You have to get past the performance layer.
You absolutely do. You have to name the raw fear, not the sanitized version you're willing to admit in public. Is the fear really, I'm worried the board will have questions? Or is it, I'm afraid I'll lose credibility if this fails? Or even, I'm afraid I'll look like I don't know what I'm doing?
You have to get to that vulnerable core of it.
Because fear just thrives in the shadows, in ambiguity. The moment you drag it into the light of clarity, it immediately weakens.
Let's use a quick scenario. Say there's a mid-level leader, we'll call her Sarah. She's tasked with pitching a completely new, unproven business model to the board. How does she face it?
Okay, so Sarah is delaying the pitch. She's obsessively tweaking the slides, finding reasons not to schedule the meeting. Her external, presentable fear is the board will reject the idea. But if she truly faces the raw fear, she realizes it's much deeper. It's, I'm afraid the rejection of my idea will be interpreted as a rejection of me, proving my internal imposter syndrome right.
Oof, yeah, that's real.
Naming that raw fear, that fear of personal judgment, that is the essential first step for her to reclaim her agency in this situation.
And once Sarah names it, she doesn't fight it. She moves to step 2, focus it. This is where she asks what value this fear is actually trying to protect.
Correct. Fear is rarely senseless. It's usually a distorted defense of something precious. So if Sarah's afraid of rejection, that fear is trying to protect the value of her professional reputation, or her integrity, or her commitment to the company's future.
Yeah.
When you reframe fear through the lens of your values, like growth or impact or trust, you instantly shift. You go from a place of shame and weakness to one of curiosity and clarity.
So the fear becomes a map.
It's a perfect map. It shows you exactly what you value most and what is truly at stake for you.
And then finally, she has to fuel it. This is the action step. The commitment. This is where the clarity follows.
This is the neurological reset button. You take one bold, values-aligned step forward. Notice I said one step, not a giant, terrifying leap. Just one real, immediate action.
So for Sarah, what would that look like?
For Sarah, it might be scheduling the pitch meeting today,
Yeah.
right now, and sending a brief email summary of the core idea to her sponsor. Even if the slides aren't perfect, that action breaks fear's paralyzing hold. The moment you take that step, your brain shifts out of that survival state and back into a momentum-building mode. You are literally rewiring your brain to recognize that movement, not retreat, is the right response to this discomfort.
So fear is the signal. The fuel formula is the processing mechanism, and the result is a leader who can actually operate strategically. Now let's turn to the second trap, which you've said is often more dangerous. Let's talk about the comfort trap.
Ah, yes. The quiet killer. Comfort is, I think, the greater long-term risk because it doesn't arrive with a bang. It doesn't trigger a crisis. It triggers a slow, silent surrender.
If fear makes you freeze because of doubt, comfort makes you hesitate because of ease.
Perfectly put. It masquerades as stability or even worse, as deserved success. It's the little voice that says, hey, we had a great year. Let's just stick to the playbook.
And this is so insidious because comfort feels like a legitimate reward. We've worked hard, we've had success, so stability feels like competence. But the sources are clear. Comfort isn't neutral. It's a slow, steady erosion.
It's a deeply uncomfortable truth. When success leads to repetitive, low-stakes environments, our brain defaults to something called the effort minimization principle. Your brain is, at its core, lazy. It's always looking for efficiency. This activates the default mode network, or DMN, a brain network that prioritizes routine, conserves energy, and actively inhibits the cognitive flexibility you need for adaptation.
So your brain is literally rewarding you for standing still, even as the world outside is accelerating. This sounds a lot like the competency trap, where your past success becomes the biggest barrier to your future adaptation.
That's precisely what it is. You get so good at playing the old game that you stop scanning the horizon for the next one. And the cost of this comfort is just staggering. It's not just about missed opportunities. It's a silent erosion of trust. When leaders start prioritizing their personal ease over the mission's future, when they stop reaching, teams stop believing, they can sense it. They can tell when their leaders are defending what isn't mattered instead of passionately creating what could be. That comfort, that stagnation, it silently sabotages the whole organization's resilience.
So how do we diagnose this? How do you spot the difference between healthy stability and this dangerous comfort drift before it becomes a full-blown crisis?
We can use a diagnostic tool called the Fear versus Comfort Decision Matrix. It's a framework that helps you quickly identify where you or your team are operating based on your levels of external, like fear of failure or market disruption, and your internal comfort, like complacency.
Okay, let's spend a minute on the specific traps inside that matrix. You mentioned stalled potential and complacency drift.
Right, so if you picture the matrix, stalled potential is in the high fear, high comfort quadrant. This is when you know you're meant for more. You see the opportunities out there, but the internal comfort of your current role, or the status quo, it just rationalizes away every bold instinct. The fear of stretching feels bigger than the discomfort of staying put.
What's the recommended bold move to get out of that stalled potential quadrant?
The move has to be a deliberate, intentional stretch. You have to choose one specific goal that both excites you and genuinely scares you a little bit, a goal you absolutely cannot achieve from inside your current comfort zone. And you need external accountability because your own rationalizations will try to pull you back in.
Okay, and then there's complacency drift. This one seems the most insidious because from the outside, it often just looks like success.
It does. This is the low fear, high comfort quadrant. Everything looks fine on the surface. Meetings are calm, metrics are stable, everyone seems productive. But internally, there's this slow, unacknowledged drift away from market relevance, away from real growth. The danger here is that there's no obvious pain signal to wake you up, not until some major disruption forces a massive panicked reaction.
Can you give a quick story of a leader stuck there in complacency drift?
Sure. Think of a successful regional manager. He's been hitting his 10% growth targets consistently for 5 years, using the exact same playbook every year. He sees the new disruptive technology emerging in the industry, but he tells himself, that's for the big markets, that's not for us. He goes to the conferences, hears the buzz, but he doesn't act on any of it. His team starts to notice his hunger isn't there anymore.
And the bold move for him.
The bold move is radical and proactive. It's to launch a high-risk pilot project based entirely on that new disruptive technology. He has to refuse to wait for the market to force his hand.
So the ultimate escape from this whole comfort trap, it seems, requires a cognitive shift. It's about changing the very questions we ask ourselves before making a decision.
Exactly. Instead of the leader asking, will everyone approve of this? Or is this proposal safe enough to protect my reputation? We have to fundamentally reframe. The bold leader asks, is this aligned with our ultimate mission? And the most powerful question to fight complacency is this: what happens specifically if we do not try this?
That question really forces you to calculate the cost of inaction.
It does. Psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt based on your values, not your momentary comfort. That's the key skill right there.
All right, so we've built the awareness of these internal traps, the fear and the comfort. Now we have to move into implementation. This is where we shift from just knowing what's true to actively building a personal leadership operating system. Let's dive into the Boldy framework.
The BOLD framework is a cyclical loop. It's designed to build leadership from the inside out, making sure that your external actions are always rooted in your internal alignment. It stands for believe, own, learn, and design. It's an engine for continuous improvement and focused momentum.
And we start with be believe. The sources argue that your mindset is your blueprint.
That's the absolute foundation. Every single bold move you make is preceded by a belief. And that belief, whether you chose it intentionally or just inherited it unconsciously, dictates what you even see as possible.
So our beliefs are like predictive models running in our head.
They're highly efficient predictive models.
Yeah.
If you believe deep down that boldness is inherently reckless, you will filter every new opportunity through a lens of caution. You'll guarantee slow movement. And this gets heavily reinforced by confirmation bias. Your brain actively looks for evidence that confirms your existing beliefs. It's why leaders can stay trapped in limiting, decades-old patterns long after they should have moved on.
So the first, most powerful job of a bold leader is to actively and systematically upgrade those limiting beliefs. How do we make that a concrete process?
We use something called the belief upgrade exercise. It's a 4-step ritual. First, you have to spot it. You have to clearly name the constraining belief. For example, I can't speak up in a senior meeting until I have 3 supporting data points and full consensus.
That's a very common, very invisible barrier for a lot of people. Okay, so what's step 2?
Second, you source it. You have to uncover where that belief came from. Was it from a previous company culture, a past failure where you were penalized for speaking up with imperfect insight? Understanding the source changes it from a fixed truth into a historical artifact.
And third is stretch it. This is where we directly attack that confirmation bias.
Exactly. You imagine and you actually articulate believing the exact opposite. Something like, my insight has unique value even when the picture isn't complete, and my voice is necessary to accelerate clarity for the team. By intellectually stretching the belief like that, you create cognitive dissonance. You force your brain to consider a new, more expansive reality.
And finally, the action step, seed it.
You have to take one micro-action that reinforces the new, bold belief. For our leader in this example, that might mean speaking up with a single, unresearched but high-value question at the very next senior meeting. Every one of those bold micro-steps becomes undeniable evidence that the new belief is true. You're not just affirming it, you're actively gathering evidence for it.
Okay, once we've done the belief work, we move to own. Radical ownership is the engine.
Ownership is the single biggest predictor of agency and momentum. It means you claim 100% responsibility for your response, your energy, your voice, your integrity, regardless of the chaos or circumstances around you.
It's a declaration of agency, not of blame.
That's the key distinction. When pressure mounts, the human default is to deflect. We blame the system, the budget, the timing. Bold leadership just stops that deflection dead in its tracks and asks, what part of this process or this outcome do I own, and how can I respond to it purposefully?
And this isn't just good for morale, right? It actually strengthens you neurologically. It makes those bold decisions less taxing emotionally.
Precisely. When you visibly own your voice and your decisions, especially when they're controversial or even when they fail, your brain reinforces the neural pathways linked to agency and confidence. It actually reduces the stress associated with uncertainty. Leaders who model this kind of ownership, they foster so much more trust, and their teams just make decisions faster.
And it's not about micromanaging.
No, not at all. It's about taking 100% responsibility for your response to reality.
Okay, let's move to learn. The source material says the bold leader's mindset is that everything is data.
This is just fundamental to sustaining boldness over time. Bold leaders don't fear failure. They see it as highly valuable, expensive, and necessary data. They metabolize failure. They ritualize reflection. Learning isn't something that happens in a post-mortem a month later. It happens in real time.
How do they make sure they're actually activating the learning and not just, ruminating on what went wrong?
Through intentional rituals. One of the best is the post-moment pause. After a challenging conversation or a near failure, they ask themselves, what did I notice about my own behavior in that moment? What assumption did this situation stretch for me? What surprised me about the outcome? Leaders who do this regularly show higher activation in the medial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain linked to self-awareness, emotional regulation, and adaptive decision-making. Learning has to be structured, not just reactive.
And that brings us to the final letter, D, design. Leadership by design, not by default.
Design is the intentional construction of your leadership persona and your environment. It's about building what's next on purpose, rather than just defaulting to old, comfortable patterns or constantly reacting to the latest crisis. Design is what makes sure every interaction, every meeting structure, every block on your calendar, it all aligns meaningfully with your stated values and your vision. It's the mechanism that translates all this complexity into actionable clarity.
So when you put the entire bold D framework, believe, own, learn, design, into consistent motion, you start to gain a tangible strategic edge. This is what the sources call the bold advantage.
That's right. The bold advantage is that strategic edge you gain by moving through aligned risk faster and more effectively than your competitors, who are all stuck in hesitation or defending the status quo. It basically functions as an innovation multiplier.
Let's elaborate on that relationship, the one between boldness and innovation. You mentioned the boldness, innovation, growth triangle.
This cycle is absolutely critical. Boldness is the initial spark. It's what challenges the status quo and forces the organization to even consider new possibilities. Innovation is the result of that challenge, where you meet that possibility with structured action. And then innovation, when it's sustained through continuous bold action, leads to measurable, sustainable growth.
And you can't shortcut that cycle.
You absolutely cannot. Growth without innovation is temporary and fragile. Innovation without boldness just results in tiny, safe refinements. And boldness without alignment is just chaos. The integrated cycle is what ensures that your daring actions are always rooted in strategic purpose.
And the sweet spot, the place where innovation truly ignites, is described as the edge of chaos.
The edge of chaos is the optimal state, both psychologically and operationally. It's that space where there's enough tension, enough uncertainty or discomfort to spark creativity and force you to adapt. But crucially, there's also enough psychological safety to allow people to take those aligned risks without being paralyzed by fear of retribution.
So bold leadership is what gives you the clarity to kind of dance right on that edge.
Exactly. Knowing when to push the team toward a stretch goal and when to stabilize the environment to rebuild trust.
This whole Boldy system sounds incredibly powerful, but like we said, frameworks can feel abstract if there's no structure. You need a timeline to prevent just endless deliberation. And that's where the D90 method comes in.
Yes, the D90 method, or designed in 90 days. It's a systematic, time-bound framework that translates all these bold intentions into measurable impact. And it leverages the neuroscience of achievement. We know that structured, aggressive deadlines reinforce learning, they intensify focus, and they prevent that creep of comfort from setting in. Boldness without a deadline is just a dream, and a deadline without boldness is just a task.
Okay, let's detail the 3 phases. It's designed to compress a year's worth of growth into 3 intensely focused months. We start with clarity, days 130.
This first month is all about ruthless prioritization. You have to define your single, measurable, stretching outcome. It has to be specific, meaningful, and just a little bit uncomfortable. It becomes the ultimate filter for every decision you make for the next 90 days. So not improve sales, it's launch a pilot product to the South American market that captures $500K in new revenue by day 90.
And once that really specific outcome is set,
Then you identify the 3 to 5 high-leverage actions, the vital few moves that are going to create a disproportionate impact toward that singular outcome. And then critically, you create commitment structures. You make a public declaration, you set up non-negotiable accountability, and you design your calendar to prioritize that outcome above all the existing maintenance work. You have to create the tension that sparks the action.
then we move into the second month, acceleration. Days 3160. This is often the hardest part, right? The messy middle where the initial enthusiasm starts to fade.
This is where most initiatives die. This phase is all about building momentum through consistency over intensity. The brain's habit center, the basal ganglia, it thrives on repetitive, predictable actions. So you have to prioritize consistent daily micro steps, small actions that just reinforce the goal over and over, and you accelerate by gathering rapid, honest feedback and adjusting your tactics weekly.
The key is recognizing the messy middle is normal.
It's essential. You have to see it as a normal stage of psychological resistance, not as a sign that you're failing. That's what lets you push through the inertia.
So if the excitement is gone, the structure of the D90 keeps you moving. And finally, integration. Days 6190.
Integration is all about cementing your success and capturing the organizational learning. You're transitioning from these one-off bold actions to sustainable, systematized habits. This means documenting what worked, standardizing those effective methods, and practicing the key skills you acquired. You're explicitly asking, what knowledge did this bold experiment create that we can now embed into our culture permanently?
All right, we have built the system. Now we have to move into the actual heat of leadership high-stakes action. And when you take bold action, setbacks, and failures, they aren't just possible, they're inevitable. So let's talk about strategic recovery. The bold comeback.
The ultimate measure of a bold leader isn't how they perform when everything is going smoothly. It's how they transform when things fall apart. A bold comeback isn't just bouncing back to where you were. It's about transforming that setback from a career threat into a powerful leadership accelerant. It's about realignment, taking the data from the failure and using it to sharpen your future direction.
And to recover strategically, you first have to correctly diagnose what actually went wrong. The sources draw a clear line between strategic failures and execution failures.
Right. The strategic failure is when your core assumptions were just fundamentally flawed. Your assumptions about the market, the customer, the technology, the strategy itself was wrong. These failures are high cost, but they're also incredibly high value because they force you to pause, reassess the entire environment, and recalibrate the direction of the whole organization.
And an execution failure.
That's when the strategy itself was sound, but the implementation just stumbled. You missed deadlines, quality control was inconsistent, communication broke down. These require you to refine your processes, fix your communication loops, and upskill your team. The recovery has to match the failure type. Fixing execution won't help a flawed strategy.
Beyond the logistics of the failure, there's that immense personal pressure. Our instinct is to go into self-protection mode. Tell us about the psychology of recovery.
This is so key. Our built-in negativity bias means we process failures far more intensely than successes. So as leaders, we instinctively cycle through this threat or rumination response. It's pure ego protection. The bold leader has to transition as swiftly as possible to the growth response. They have to prioritize learning and insight above protecting their own image. The speed of your comeback depends entirely on how quickly you can make that shift, from defending your ego to actively prioritizing your growth.
What's the practical strategy to make that critical shift?
It's a structured process. First, you pause. intentionally. You process the emotion without disconnecting from your team. Second, you extract insights. You ask, what did this setback uniquely reveal about our team's weaknesses or about hidden market opportunities? Third, you craft an empowering narrative.
Right.
You have to own the story. You frame the setback as necessary tuition for future success, not as a final verdict on your capability. And fourth, you strategically re-engage using those new expensive insights to refine your goals and come back stronger.
So if recovery is about dealing with internal setbacks, then bold conversations are about proactively addressing the external tension and misalignment that just inevitably comes up in a high-performing team. The central truth here is arresting. The conversation you are afraid to have is the conversation you need to have.
The cost of silence is always underestimated. We avoid these conversations because they literally activate social pain centers in our brain. They lead to chronic stress. But the real cost shows up in systemic friction, in missed opportunities, and in the slow, steady erosion of trust. The bold conversation advantage is that it accelerates results by removing those interpersonal barriers, and, paradoxically, it builds greater trust through respectful truth-telling.
So how do we structure these high-stakes interactions so they're actually productive and not just volatile?
We can rely on the bold conversation framework, which is built on 5 foundational elements. First, establish a clear purpose. You have to focus the conversation on mutual benefit and moving forward, not on proving who was right or wrong in the past.
Second, ensure psychological safety.
Absolutely. You have to create a brave space by communicating that mutual purpose and really inviting dialogue. You have to guarantee that the other person's concerns will be heard without any retaliation.
And what about the content of the conversation itself?
Third, you have to blend candor and care. You speak directly and honestly about the issue, but you frame it with respect and with genuine concern for the other person's growth. Fourth, ensure constructive engagement. You stay focused on patterns, systems, and behaviors, not on personality attacks or old grudges. And finally, you have to secure forward movement. You end the conversation by generating specific, measurable, actionable agreements and next steps. You make sure the tension translates into tangible progress.
The major barrier, though, it's still that fear, the fear that activates the social pain. How do we get over that psychological hump?
It comes down to a really powerful reframe. Instead of interpreting the anxiety or the tension you feel before the conversation as a signal to avoid it, you have to recognize it as verification that this conversation matters deeply to the mission or to the relationship. That reframe allows you to channel that intense energy into courageous, aligned action rather than letting it manifest as avoidance.
Okay, now we arrive at what feels like the culmination of all this. The act itself. Bold decisions. The leader has to integrate 3 essential and often competing elements: data, instinct, and courage. Together, this is the bold decision triad.
The decision dilemma is what plagues modern leadership. You see analysis paralysis on one side, and then you see instinct suppression waiting for data that never comes on the other. Leaders who wait for 100% perfect information, they rarely lead at all. So the triad integrates these forces for high-speed, high-quality decision-making.
Let's start with data literacy. We all know we need data, but how does a bold leader use it differently?
Data isn't just descriptive. It has to be used proactively to challenge your assumptions, to identify counterintuitive opportunities, and to refine your own pattern recognition. It's not about the sheer volume of data you can gather. It's about discernment. It's about actively seeking data that contradicts your established assumptions or supports an unpopular but promising view. Data is the anchor that prevents boldness from becoming recklessness.
And then there's intuitive intelligence, that experienced gut feeling.
In an experienced leader, intuition is really just honed pattern recognition. It's been accumulated over years and years of high-stakes environments. It's not some random impression. It's wisdom from metabolized experience. Now, leaders have to verify that instinct through structured testing, maybe a pre-mortem analysis, but they have to trust their proven intuition where data has gaps or where the speed of the environment just demands rapid action. Data provides the foundation. Intuition contextualizes it instantly.
But the most crucial element, the one that actually translates thought into action, is decisive courage.
Decisive courage is the bridge. Leaders have to intellectually and emotionally weigh the very tangible risks of action against the profound and often invisible costs of inaction, the silent surrender to the status quo. And this also requires matching your speed to the context. You have to differentiate reversible decisions, which should be fast and fluid, from irreversible ones, which need deeper deliberation but still require a timely resolution.
So how do leaders actually build that courage muscle? You can't just wait around until you feel brave before you take the leap.
No, you can't. Courage is built entirely through intentional, systematic practice. One way is fear reframing. You consciously label the physiological responses you feel, the elevated heart rate, the surge of adrenaline. You label them as energizing preparation for an important challenge rather than a threat-demanding retreat. You rebrand the sensation. Furthermore, you build conviction through the practice of decisional closure. That's the mental signal that deliberation is over and execution has begun. Bold leaders then communicate with what's called confident uncertainty.
Confident uncertainty, I like that.
It's about assuring your followers of your commitment to the process without pretending you know the unknowable outcome. And that builds tremendous trust.
Okay, so we've built the awareness, the systems, and the muscle for bold action. But now we face the final test, the sustainability challenge. How do you maintain this level of boldness when that immense gravitational pull of daily routine starts dragging you back into comfort?
The enduring truth is that rhythms outperform resolutions. Sustainable, bold leadership isn't built on heroic, one-off acts. It's built on consistent, manageable practices that you integrate into your existing routines. Willpower is notoriously unreliable. We have to embed courage into daily life so systematically that it becomes the path of least resistance.
And this is where the BLD 365 system comes in, providing that structure. It's designed to embed courage into routine through multiple layered timeframes.
Right. This system is what weaves courage into the organizational fabric. It starts small, with daily micro steps. Things like a 2-minute morning intention setting, where you visualize one challenging situation where you will choose courage, or a brief end-of-day reflection on one choice you made that deviated from the status quo. These tiny habits reinforce the new neural pathways.
And then we scale that commitment up from there.
Exactly. We move to weekly rhythms, like intentionally initiating one bold conversation you've been avoiding, or reviewing your calendar to identify one pending decision you can accelerate immediately. Then you have monthly rituals, which are deeper and more strategic. Structured self-assessments against your bold metrics, or checking in with a bold leadership circle for external challenge.
And then the long-term checkup.
The quarterly recalibration. This is a half-day retreat or a dedicated coaching session for deeper reflection. You challenge the previous quarter's foundational assumptions. You use the fear versus comfort matrix to make sure you haven't drifted. This structure is what prevents the urgency trap from killing your long-term intention.
That structure is vital, but we talked about willpower being insufficient. So how do we make sure these practices actually stick without relying on sheer mental effort?
We use a strategy called environment design. We have to recognize that subtle environmental factors, visual triggers on your desk, scheduled blocks on your calendar, the physical workspace, they influence our behavior more powerfully than our internal willpower ever could. You have to actively design your workspace and your calendar to make courage the path of least resistance. For example, blocking non-negotiable time for high-impact actions and treating that time with the same sanctity as a meeting with the CEO. You remove the friction that makes the bold choice feel harder than the safe one.
And the ultimate, most sustainable form of courage, though, is shifting from just doing bold things to becoming a bold person. This is identity-based boldness.
This is the profound secret at the center of it all. Boldness can't be a situational skill you just turn on and off. It has to be a decision you make in advance to lead boldly, period. When boldness becomes who you are, when it's integrated into your identity narrative, reinforced by your affirmations, modeled through consistent choices, it persists far longer than boldness driven by temporary motivation. It becomes an internal anchor.
And that foundational choice, the one that prioritizes agency, is critical. It involves actively challenging our own loss aversion.
Loss aversion is that cognitive bias, where the fear of losing something feels twice as powerful as the thrill of an equivalent game. Bold leaders have to constantly reorient their perspective away from just protecting what they already have and toward proactively pursuing what is possible. They choose purposeful action and agency over waiting for external conditions to miraculously change.
And the final measure of this bold leader, it's their legacy.
The legacy isn't about chasing applause or titles or temporary achievements that just fade with time. It's the lasting imprint you leave behind. It's about authentic integration leading consistently from your genuine integrated self, not from some compartmentalized professional role. The true measure of a bold leader is the leaders they grow who then multiply that courage. It's the way they transform the culture to embed boldness into the collective identity. Bold leaders redefine what's possible, and they light a path for people they will never even meet.
That was an incredibly detailed roadmap for transforming leadership from, reactive management to proactive, bold action. We covered that crucial shift from seeing fear as an enemy to seeing it as fuel with the fuel formula. We recognized comfort as the silent killer of progress. We detailed the Boldy framework for internal clarity.
And we looked at how to translate that intention into measurable impact with the D90 method, and how to sustain it all using the Boldy 365 system and that identity-based commitment.
I think the crucial takeaway, for me at least, is that every leader has the capacity for this. Boldness isn't some mysterious talent you're born with. It's a decision.
It is a decision, and it's a commitment to lead with intention, with clarity, and with courage, regardless of the circumstances. You now have every tool necessary to move from just being aware of these principles to actually activating them.
And remember that the most sustainable form of courage is identity-based. When boldness becomes who you are, not just something you occasionally choose to do, everything changes.
So as you move forward from this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Look deep into your system, your team, your own leadership, and identify one area, a strategy, a cultural norm, a personal belief, where you are currently protecting something outdated simply out of comfort or caution.
If you don't act on that insight, what future are you choosing by default? Commit to one small, bold move today, because imperfect action creates infinitely more progress than perfect, paralyzed planning.
Choose direction over delay. Choose agency over circumstance.
Now go be bold.